The old monk's hands trembled as he pushed the iron door shut. The sound of metal scraping stone echoed through the cold, underground chamber. A faint glow shimmered from a single candle, its flame bending every time a draft of air seeped through the cracks in the walls. His name was Brother Elric, and tonight he was doing something forbidden, something that could cost him his life if the wrong eyes ever saw what he had hidden here. Elric's chamber was nothing like the quiet prayer halls above. Instead, it smelled of sulfur, hot wax, and something sharper, almost metallic. The walls were lined with shelves holding cracked glass vessels, clay pots sealed with wax, and rolls of parchment covered in cramped handwriting. Strange diagrams, some of them drawn in thick black ink, showed circles, triangles, and symbols that would have frightened most of the monks in his monastery. But to Elric, these marks were not heresy. They were hope. He whispered to himself as he placed a small brass bowl on a table. One more step, just one more step, and it will work. His voice was hoarse, and the candlelight flickered across his gaunt face. He had spent years studying books that were banned by the church, copying fragments of alchemical recipes for merchants, travelers, and even soldiers returning from the East. Some of the texts promised to turn lead into gold. Others spoke of healing every illness with a single elixir, and a few, too dangerous to repeat aloud, hinted at life beyond death. But Elric wasn't after gold. His obsession was far stranger and far more personal. Outside, the monastery bells had long gone silent, and most of the brothers were asleep. No one would know he was down here, not tonight. He reached for a glass vial filled with a thick green liquid. The candlelight made it look alive, almost like it was moving on its own. Carefully, he poured a few drops into the brass bowl, then added powdered lead, muttering Latin words under his breath. The liquid hissed, releasing a sour smoke that burned his eyes. The room filled with a sharp, bitter smell. Elric coughed, but didn't stop. He had followed every step exactly as written in the ancient manuscript he had found years ago. That manuscript, the one he had hidden beneath the chapel floor, was the only thing that had ever promised him what he wanted, the secret to bring someone back. He thought of her again, her face, her voice. He had been young when she died, but the memory of her never left him. Elric could still feel the weight of her hand in his when she took her last breath. He had prayed for years, begged the saints, but nothing brought her back. And so, when the old traveler whispered stories about alchemists who could cheat death, Elric listened. He traded prayers for secret books, traded faith for forbidden knowledge. The candle flickered wildly as the mixture in the bowl began to bubble. His heart pounded. This was it. If the texts were right, he was moments away from proving the impossible. He reached for the final ingredient, a single lock of hair tied carefully with a thread. His hand hovered over the bowl. He hesitated just for a second before dropping it in. The reaction was instant. The liquid hissed, and the smoke turned thick and black. The smell grew worse, choking him, but he didn't stop watching. The mixture glowed faintly, a dull orange light, and for a moment, for just a heartbeat, he swore he saw something move in the smoke, like a shadow reaching out toward him. Then the glow vanished. The bowl went dark. Elric froze. His hands trembled as he stared into the blackened brass bowl. Nothing. No sound. No movement. No miracle. Just silence. His stomach twisted in disappointment, and his heart sank. Had he done something wrong? Was the formula flawed, or was the promise just another lie, like so many others he had chased? But as he leaned closer, a faint scratching sound came from the table. His eyes widened. Slowly, almost too slow to notice, the ashes in the bowl shifted, curling as if something underneath them was trying to move. Elric's breath caught in his throat. He stared, too afraid to touch it, but too desperate to look away. Then a whisper. It wasn't a sound that came from his ears, but from his mind. A cold voice, quiet but clear. Elric. His heart stopped. The candle flickered as if the room itself shivered. He looked around, but he was alone. The voice came again, softer this time, but closer. Elric. He stumbled backward, knocking over a glass jar that shattered on the floor. His eyes darted to the bowl. The ashes swirled once more, and then stillness. The whisper stopped. Elric stood frozen, chest rising and falling in panicked breaths. He should have destroyed everything right then. He should have thrown the bowl into the fire, buried the books, and prayed for forgiveness. But instead, he stepped closer, his hands shaking as he whispered, "Is it you?" The bowl didn't answer. For hours, he sat there, staring at the ashes, waiting for another sign. But nothing came, and yet he couldn't stop thinking about that voice. He had heard her. He knew he had. When dawn finally broke, Elric covered the bowl with a cloth and hid it beneath a wooden chest. He wiped the table clean, burned the scraps of parchment he had used for notes, and washed his hands until they were raw. To the other monks, he looked tired but ordinary. No one would suspect that the quiet, gentle brother Elric had just broken every law of God and man to reach across the veil of death. But deep inside, he couldn't stop thinking about what he had done and what it meant. If he had heard her once, he could hear her again. And if he could hear her, maybe he could bring her back. Far away, in a castle belonging to a nobleman who never prayed, another alchemist was working on something entirely different. His name was Master Gervais, and unlike Elric, he didn't care about love or lost family. Gervais was after power, real power, the kind that kings would kill for. In his workshop, he surrounded himself with strange tools, glass tubes connected by twisting pipes, furnaces that burned all night, and sheets of parchment covered in symbols no ordinary scholar could read. Gervais had already created things that shouldn't exist, powders that burned brighter than fire, liquids that melted metal in seconds, and something that could make a man feel younger for a single night. But none of it was enough. He wanted gold. He wanted immortality. And he was getting closer. Servants whispered about the screams they heard coming from his chamber at night. Some said he used animals for his experiments. Others said the animals weren't animals at all. The church had already sent warnings, but Gervais laughed at them. To him, religion was for fools, and if the priests dared to interfere, he was ready to show them something that would make them kneel. One night, Gervais received a letter. It was written in careful, nervous handwriting, and it asked for a meeting. The writer claimed to have discovered something remarkable, something that might interest him. Gervais almost ignored it, but the words at the bottom caught his eye. "I have spoken to the dead." And so, a few weeks later, two men who should never have met found themselves standing face to face. Elric and Gervais. One seeking love, one seeking power, both standing on the edge of a secret that would change everything. And neither of them knew that what they were about to unleash would not just test the limits of alchemy. It would rewrite everything they thought they understood about life, death, and the human soul. Because in the shadows of medieval Europe, alchemy was never just about gold. It was about control. And sometimes, the ones who tried to play God learned the darkest truth of all. The first time Elric laid eyes on Gervais, he felt an uneasy chill. The nobleman's chamber was too bright, too polished for someone who dealt in secrets. The walls were draped in velvet, the floor lined with thick rugs, and the smell of expensive wine hung in the air. But under all that luxury, there was something sharp and dangerous about the man. His eyes were cold, almost calculating, and when he smiled, it felt like the kind of smile that hit a knife. "You're the monk," Gervais said, his voice smooth, almost amused. "The one who dared to send me a letter." Elric kept his head lowered. "I had no choice. You're the only one who might understand." "Understand?" Gervais leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of wine. "You claim you spoke to the dead. Do you know how many charlatans whisper that same lie to me every year?" "I'm not lying," Elric said quickly. His hands tightened around the bundle of cloth he held. Inside was the brass bowl, carefully wrapped and hidden. "I heard her voice. I know it was real." Gervais tilted his head, studying him. "And you're sure it wasn't guilt, or grief, or some trick of your mind?" Elric hesitated, but shook his head. "No, it was her. She said my name." For a long moment, Gervais didn't speak. Then, with a faint smile, he gestured to the table. "Show me." Elric's heart pounded as he placed the wrapped bowl on the table and slowly peeled back the cloth. The metal was still stained black from the last attempt. The ashes settled at the bottom. Gervais leaned forward, peering at it, as if he were inspecting a rare jewel. "You used lead, didn't you?" Gervais asked suddenly. mixed with vitriol, and something personal, hair perhaps. Elric's eyes widened. How did you? Gervais chuckled. Because you're not the first to try. Many have attempted to cross the boundary between life and death. Most fail. Elric swallowed hard. And did anyone succeed? The nobleman didn't answer right away. Instead, he set down his glass and leaned closer. That depends on what you call success. Some brought back fragments. Shadows. Not life, not truly, but echoes of something that should have stayed dead. Elric's stomach twisted. Echoes. Gervais nodded slowly. The soul doesn't like to be called back. If it comes, it doesn't come willingly. And when it does, it changes. That's why the church fears alchemy. Not because it threatens their gold or power, but because it touches something they don't understand. Elric's fingers tightened on the edge of the table. I don't care about the church. I need to see her again. Gervais stared at him for a long moment before smiling faintly. Then perhaps we can help each other. The deal was made that night. Gervais would provide the tools, the rare ingredients, and the knowledge Elric didn't yet have. In return, Elric would share everything he had learned, every scrap of text, every small success, every detail of that strange voice he had heard. The two men began their work in secret. Gervais's castle had a hidden chamber below the wine cellar, a room where no servant dared to go. They turned it into a workshop, filling it with furnaces, glass vessels, and jars of powders that shimmered in unnatural colors. The nights blurred together. Elric barely slept. Gervais seemed to thrive on exhaustion, his excitement growing with every failed experiment. They burned through metals, dissolved bones and strange acids, and boiled plants that most herbalists considered poisonous. And through it all, Elric whispered prayers under his breath, torn between hope and guilt. One evening, after hours of silence, Gervais slammed his hands on the table. We're close, he said, his voice sharp with excitement. I can feel it. Elric looked up from the parchment he had been studying. You said that yesterday. This time I mean it, Gervais snapped. He picked up a vial filled with thick red liquid and held it to the candlelight. This is the key. Blood, monk. Not hair, not ashes. Blood carries life. And if we can trap that life at the right moment, we can force it back. Elric froze. No. Gervais raised an eyebrow. No. I won't spill blood, Elric said firmly. She wouldn't want that. The nobleman's smile faded. Then maybe you don't want her back as much as you think. Elric's jaw tightened. There has to be another way. Gervais shrugged. There isn't. Everything living is bound by blood. Even the oldest texts agree. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. The question is, monk, how far are you willing to go? Elric didn't answer. His mind felt heavy, torn between longing and fear. That night, when Gervais finally left the workshop, Elric stayed behind, staring at the blackened brass bowl. He touched its cold surface, remembering the soft whisper of his name. If it really was her voice, did that mean she was suffering? Did she call to him willingly? Or had he pulled her into something she couldn't escape? The next few weeks passed in uneasy silence. Gervais became more impatient, more reckless. He stopped sleeping, muttering to himself as he scribbled strange diagrams on the walls. Servants avoided him, whispering about shadows that seemed to move in the castle at night, about the strange smell that seeped through the floors. Elric, meanwhile, grew quieter. He still worked with Gervais, still helped him grind powders and mix strange liquids, but his hands trembled more now. He couldn't stop thinking about that voice, about what Gervais had said, that souls didn't like to be called back. One night, Elric woke from a restless sleep in the small chamber Gervais had given him. At first, he thought it was a dream, but then he heard it. Elric! The voice again. Soft, broken, almost pleading. He sat up quickly, heart pounding. The room was dark, the candle burned low, but the air felt cold, too cold for the summer night. Elric! This time it was closer. He turned toward the corner of the room and froze. There, just beyond the reach of the candlelight, stood a shape. Not solid, not clear, but almost human, like smoke curling into the outline of a woman. Her face was hidden, her head bowed, and her hands hung at her sides. Elric's breath caught. Is it you? The figure tilted its head slowly, almost painfully. He rose from the bed, moving closer, his hands shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to see you again." The figure twitched, and then, so faint he almost didn't hear it. "Why?" Tears filled his eyes. "Because I couldn't let you go." The figure took a step forward. The candle flickered, and for just a second, her face came into view, pale, hollow, and wrong, as if her skin didn't fit quite right. Elric stumbled back, his heart racing. She moved again, closer now, her mouth opening as if to speak, but instead of words, a soft, wet sound escaped, like air forced through water. And then, just as suddenly, she vanished. Elric stood frozen in the silence, staring at the empty corner of the room. The candle flickered once more and went out. Far below the castle, in the secret workshop, Gervais worked late into the night, unaware of what Elric had just seen. His hands moved quickly, mixing powders with a steady rhythm. His eyes burned with excitement, and he didn't notice the faint shadow moving across the wall behind him, a shape that didn't belong to either man. The air grew colder. The furnace flickered, and then a whisper, not to Elric this time, but to Gervais. "You will open the door." Gervais froze, his eyes widening. But instead of fear, a slow smile spread across his face. "Finally," he whispered. The following morning, Elric looked pale, almost sick. He hadn't slept after what he saw. His hands shook as he washed his face with cold water, trying to convince himself it had been a dream. But the voice still echoed in his head, soft and broken. "Why?" When he entered the workshop, Gervais was already there, his sleeves rolled up, his hands stained with something dark. He looked more awake than ever, his eyes bright with feverish excitement. "You look terrible, monk," Gervais said, glancing at him only briefly before returning to the glowing furnace. "Did you pray too much last night?" Elric hesitated. I saw her." Gervais stopped stirring the mixture in the glass vessel. "You what?" "She came to me," Elric said quietly. His voice trembled. Not fully, like a shadow, but it was her. She spoke. Gervais's eyes narrowed, his interest sharp. "What did she say?" Elric hesitated, then whispered. "She asked why." Gervais smirked. "Of course she did. The dead never come willingly. You've pulled her from peace, and now she wants to know why you disturb her." Elric swallowed hard. "Maybe we should stop." "Stop." Gervais's voice rose, almost laughing. "You've done what most alchemists only dream of, and you want to stop? You're closer than anyone in centuries." "She didn't look right," Elric said, lowering his voice. "Her face wasn't her face anymore." Gervais waved a dismissive hand. "That's because she's incomplete. You've only dragged a part of her through. With the right method, the right formula, you could bring her back fully, body, soul, everything." Elric shook his head. "You don't know that." Gervais turned, his expression sharp, almost cruel. "I know more than you think. You may have brought her whisper, monk, but I will bring her flesh. And when we do, you'll thank me." Elric wanted to argue, but part of him, against his better judgment, wanted to believe. What if Gervais was right? What if there truly was a way to make her whole again? Gervais smiled when he saw the hesitation in Elric's eyes. "Good. You're thinking. Now, help me prepare the next phase." That night, they worked together in near silence. Gervais dictated instructions while Elric measured powders with trembling hands. The furnace glowed hotter than ever, filling the room with waves of heat. Strange fumes curled from the boiling vessels, leaving a bitter taste in the air. As the hours passed, the atmosphere in the chamber grew heavier, almost oppressive. The walls felt closer somehow, and the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long. At one point, while Elric was grinding a mineral into fine dust, he felt a sudden cold draft brush his neck. He turned sharply, expecting to see the door open, but it was closed. Gervais didn't notice, too absorbed in his work. The whisper came again. "Elric!" He froze, staring at the far corner of the room where the shadows pooled thickest. "Not here. Not now." The voice was softer this time, almost pleading, and for a moment he thought he saw the faint outline of that same figure standing in the darkness. Gervais looked up, noticing his stillness. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Elric said quickly, tearing his eyes away. Just tired. Gervais gave him a curious look, but said nothing. When Elric glanced back at the corner, the figure was gone. The following days blurred together in a haze of work and unease. The more experiments they performed, the stranger the atmosphere in the castle became. Servants whispered about doors opening on their own, about hearing footsteps in empty hallways. Elric tried to ignore it, but every night the whispers grew louder, closer, as if following him. Finally, after weeks of preparation, Gervais declared they were ready for a true attempt. "This will be the night we prove everything," Gervais said, almost giddy. He stood before the furnace, his eyes bright, his hand steady. "If this works, Monk, you'll see her again. Not a shadow, not a whisper, her." Elric stared at the table where the ingredients were laid out. Powders, crushed herbs, small shards of crystal, and a silver chalice filled with a dark liquid. His stomach turned when he realized what that liquid was. "You used blood," he whispered. Gervais smiled faintly. "Not human, not yet. But life calls to life, and this is the strongest binding we have. Are you ready?" Elric hesitated, his chest tight. He wanted to say no. Every part of him screamed to stop. But then he remembered her smile, her laughter, the way her hand felt in his. "Yes," he said quietly. They worked for hours, carefully mixing and heating each step of the formula. The air grew thick with smoke, the smell sharp and almost metallic. The furnace roared, and the glow filled the entire chamber, throwing flickering light across the walls. When the final ingredient was added, Gervais stepped back, his eyes fixed on the bubbling liquid in the brass bowl. "Now," he whispered almost reverently. The mixture hissed, then glowed faintly, pulsing as if alive. The air in the room shifted, growing colder despite the heat from the furnace. Elric's heart pounded as he stepped closer, staring into the light. Then it happened. The surface of the liquid rippled, and slowly a shape began to form. Faint at first, then clearer. A face. Her face. Elric gasped. "It's her." The features were soft at first, almost like water painting her image, but then they grew sharper. Her eyes opened, staring at him. "Elric," she whispered, her voice thin but clear. Tears filled his eyes. "I'm here," he said, stepping closer. "I'm here." But then her expression changed. Her soft gaze hardened, her mouth twisting into something strange, almost pained. "Why?" she whispered again, louder this time. Elric's heart tightened. "I wanted to bring you back. I wanted to see you again." Her eyes darkened, the glow around her face flickering like a candle in the wind. "You shouldn't have." Before Elric could respond, the light flared bright, and the liquid in the bowl began to boil violently. The face twisted, her mouth opening in a silent scream, and the glow turned from soft gold to a deep, sickly red. Gervais stepped forward, his eyes wide with fascination. "Don't stop. This is it. She's coming through." "No!" Elric shouted, reaching for the bowl. "Something's wrong." The liquid hissed, and then a sharp crack filled the room as the brass bowl split, spilling the glowing mixture across the table. The light flared once more before vanishing, leaving only smoke and the smell of burning metal. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, from the far corner of the room, a low, soft whisper came. "Elric." But this time, it wasn't her voice. It was deeper, colder. Gervais froze, his excitement replaced by something else, something that almost looked like fear. The shadows in the room shifted, pooling together as if something unseen was moving closer. Elric stepped back, his breath catching. "What do we do?" Gervais didn't answer. He stared into the darkness, his jaw tight, his voice low. "We opened the door." The air in the chamber grew heavier, thick with the scent of smoke and something else, something damp and rotten, like soil freshly turned after rain. The shadows in the corners of the room stretched unnaturally, curling upward as if drawn toward the ceiling. The furnace hissed, its flames sputtering, and the temperature dropped so sharply that Elric could see his breath. "Elric," the voice came again, low and drawn out, almost curious. Elric stepped back until his shoulders hit the wall. His heart hammered in his chest. and his eyes darted toward the table where the brass bowl lay cracked and blackened. Nothing moved there now, only the faint glow of cooling embers. Gervais, however, didn't move away. He leaned forward, his expression unreadable, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "It worked," he whispered. "Do you hear it? We've done it." Elric shook his head. "That's not her." Gervais turned slightly, his sharp smile returning. "Does it matter?" Something answered. "That means the door is open." "This isn't what I wanted," Elric said, his voice breaking. "I only wanted her." The shadows in the corner seemed to pulse at his words, as if reacting. Slowly, they stretched, twisting into a vague human shape. The outline was wrong. Too thin, too long, its limbs bent at strange angles. Elric's chest tightened, his stomach churning. "Close it," he said quickly. "We have to stop." "Stop." Gervais's laugh was quiet but sharp, almost mocking. "This is only the beginning. Don't you see? We've done what no alchemist in centuries has achieved. We called something back. That isn't life," Elric whispered. "It doesn't need to be life," Gervais said, his eyes glinting with excitement. "It's power. Power enough to change everything." Before Elric could respond, the shadow in the corner moved. It didn't walk. It glided, slow and deliberate, as though testing its new form. The faint sound of scratching filled the room, like nails dragging across stone. Elric pressed himself harder against the wall. "Gervais." The nobleman didn't move away. He stepped closer to the figure, his curiosity stronger than his fear. "What are you?" he asked softly. The figure tilted its head, the motion jerky, unnatural. For a moment, the room went silent, the only sound the low hiss of the dying furnace. Then the voice came again, low, stretched, almost amused. "You called. I came." Elric's heart raced. "This is wrong. We have to send it back." But Gervais's eyes burned with fascination. "Send it back? No, monk. This is what we've been searching for." The figure moved closer. Its shape shifted with every step, its edges blurring like smoke, until it was only a few feet away from Gervais. Elric's voice rose. "Don't go near it." But Gervais didn't listen. His hand trembled slightly as he reached toward the figure, as if testing whether it was solid. "If you can hear me," he said softly, "you can answer me. What lies beyond death?" The figure's head twitched, and for a moment, it almost looked like it was smiling. Then, faster than Elric expected, it moved. The shadow lunged, its form snapping forward unnaturally. Gervais cried out as it passed through him like smoke, but his body stiffened as if struck by something solid. His eyes widened, and his mouth opened in a silent gasp. "Gervais!" Elric rushed forward, but the nobleman staggered back, clutching his chest. The shadow slipped behind him, curling upward like a serpent. Gervais gasped for air, his face pale, his hands shaking. Then, suddenly, he straightened, his breathing slowing. He lowered his hands, his expression calm, too calm. "Elric," he said, his voice strange, lower, slower, as though someone else spoke through him. Elric froze. "Gervais." The nobleman smiled, but it wasn't his usual smile. It was colder, sharper, wrong. "You opened the door," he said, tilting his head unnaturally. "Now we walk through." Elric's stomach twisted. "You're not him." The figure behind Gervais flickered, dissolving into smoke before vanishing completely. But the way Gervais stood, the way he looked at Elric, made it clear the shadow hadn't left. Elric took a step back. "Let him go." Gervais tilted his head again, the motion jerky. "Why should I? He wanted this. He invited me." "He didn't know what you are," Elric said, his voice trembling. The thing inside Gervais smiled wider. "And you do." Elric didn't answer. His heart pounded as he looked toward the cracked brass bowl, its surface still faintly glowing. Maybe if he destroyed it, he could break whatever had come through. He lunged toward the table, grabbing the bowl. Gervais moved faster than Elric thought possible. His hand shot out, gripping Elric's wrist with unnatural strength. "No," the voice said sharply. "The door stays open." Elric struggled, but Gervais's grip was iron. His eyes, once sharp and human, now glowed faintly, almost like embers. "Let go," Elric shouted. "You wanted her back," the voice inside Gervais said, its tone almost mocking. You wanted to see her. I can give her to you. Just don't close the door. Elric froze, his chest tightening. You can't bring her back. The thing smiled. Oh, I can bring her. But she won't be the same. None of them are. Elric's grip on the bowl tightened. His heart ached at the thought of her, but he shook his head. I can't. The thing inside Gervais stared at him for a long moment before its smile faded. Then you will lose everything. With a sudden jerk, Gervais shoved Elric backward. The monk stumbled, dropping the bowl, which clattered to the floor but didn't break further. Gervais, no, the thing inside him, turned toward the furnace, his movements unnaturally smooth. We don't need you, it said, almost to itself. The door is open, and once it's wide enough, more will come. Elric's stomach turned cold. More. The thing looked at him, its smile returning, slow and cruel. Did you think you were the only one who wanted to call the dead? It asked softly. Every alchemist who ever tried, every one of them knocked on the same door. And now, thanks to you, we are answering. Elric's breath caught. The air in the room shifted again, heavier now, colder. The shadows on the walls stretched, curling into shapes, faces, limbs, things that shouldn't exist. And then, from the darkness, more whispers began. Dozens of them. Elric, let us in. You opened it. The walls seemed to pulse, the air humming with something alive. The furnace flared brighter, and the cracked brass bowl began to glow again, as if feeding on the voices. Elric backed toward the door, his heart pounding. What have we done? Gervais, or whatever was inside him, turned toward the shadows, spreading his arms as if welcoming them. Welcome home, the voice said. The whispers grew louder, filling the chamber, rising into something almost like laughter. Elric's hand fumbled for the door handle, his mind racing. He had to leave, had to find a way to undo this before it was too late. But as he pulled the door open, a sharp cold wind slammed it shut again, trapping him inside. The voices grew louder still. The shadows moved closer. And as Elric turned, his back against the door, he realized the truth. They weren't just coming for Gervais. They were coming for him too. The room felt alive. The air moved in slow, deliberate currents, brushing against Elric's skin like invisible fingers. The voices whispered from every corner now, soft but insistent, like 100 different breaths speaking at once. He pressed his back against the wooden door, trying to steady his breathing, but his heart pounded so loudly that he wondered if they could hear it. Across the room, Gervais stood unnaturally still, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. His body looked human, but his movements were too controlled, too precise. Every time he turned his head, it was as if he had to remind himself how to move like a man. You're afraid, the voice coming from Gervais said calmly. It didn't sound like the nobleman anymore. It was too smooth, too deliberate. But you wanted this. You wanted her. Elric's fingers tightened around the wooden doorframe. His mind raced, torn between the urge to run and the thought of her. His heart ached at the memory of her face, her voice calling his name that night. He wanted to believe she was still somewhere close, waiting for him. But this, whatever was happening now, felt wrong, twisted. You can still have her, the voice continued. She's waiting. You've already pulled her halfway. Let us help you finish. Elric swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak. That thing I saw, it wasn't her. That wasn't who she was. Gervais tilted his head, the faint smile never leaving his face. It wasn't finished. None of them are, not at first. You must understand, monk, the soul doesn't return whole without persuasion. The shadows on the walls twitched at his words, their shapes curling into something almost human before melting back into blackness. Elric couldn't stop staring at them. The longer he watched, the more it felt like they were staring back. The whispers rose again, overlapping, filling the air like a soft hum. Some voices sounded pleading, others angry, but a few seemed almost cheerful, as if mocking him. He pressed his hands against his ears, but it didn't help. The voices weren't just around him anymore. They were inside his head. Stop it, he whispered. The voices answered at once. You called us. You opened it. You can't close it now. Elric shook his head, his breathing quickening. I didn't mean to. I only wanted her. The figure that had once been Gervais stepped closer, slow and measured, his boots echoing softly against the stone floor. And that's why we came. Do you think you're the first to beg for love to return? Every alchemist who ever worked in secret wanted the same thing. Some beg for lovers, some for children, some for power. But the truth is always the same. Elric's eyes darted to him. What truth? The thing smiled wider. We don't come because you're wise, or because you deserve us. We come because you ask. Every prayer, every whispered wish at night, it's a knock on the same door. And now that you've opened it, monk, we are listening. Elric's stomach twisted, while rising in his throat. You're not her. You're not any of them. Gervais's eyes glowed brighter, as if amused. What is the difference? A voice is a voice. A face is a face. You don't want her soul, not really. You want the memory of her. You want to feel her hand in yours again. We can give you that. Elric clenched his fists, shaking his head. That's not her. That's a lot. The voices around him rose again, louder now, almost angry. The shadows twitched violently, stretching across the floor like ink spreading in water. Don't anger them, the thing in Gervais said softly, almost playfully. They've been waiting a long time for this. Elric stepped sideways along the wall, his eyes darting to the table where the cracked brass bowl still lay, glowing faintly. He thought about smashing it, throwing it into the furnace, anything to stop whatever was happening. But something in him hesitated. What if destroying it trapped her wherever she was? What if she was truly reaching for him? The memory of her whisper came back to him, softer than the others, almost mournful. Why? His chest tightened. Was she suffering because of him? The whispers overlapped again, louder now, almost desperate. Let us through. Open it wider. Bring us back. And then, through all the voices, one softer sound broke through. Elric, his heart skipped. That voice was different. It was hers, not like the mocking tone of the others. Softer, sad, almost pleading. He froze, his eyes darting to the corner of the room where the shadowy figure had first appeared weeks ago. Slowly, faintly, the shape began to form again. Her shape. Elric, she whispered again, her voice shaking. He stepped forward before he could stop himself. I'm here. The figure tilted its head. Even in the flickering light, she looked clearer than before, her features forming slowly from the darkness. Her eyes were hollow, but her face, though pale and wrong, was closer to how he remembered. Help me, she whispered. Elric's breath caught. How? Tell me how. The shadows hissed at his words, writhing like snakes. The glow in the brass bowl flared brighter, as if feeding on his desperation. Behind him, Gervais's voice grew sharper. Don't listen to her. That's not her. But Elric couldn't look away. It's you, isn't it? It's really you. The figure reached out one thin, trembling hand. Let me in. Elric froze, torn between everything he knew and everything he wanted. His chest ached, his mind screaming for him to stop, but his heart whispered the truth he couldn't deny. He would do anything to hold her again, even for a moment. Gervais stepped closer, his movements quick, controlled. Don't you understand, monk? That's not her asking. That's them using her face. But Elric's eyes stayed locked on the figure. Please, he whispered. Tell me it's you. The figure's hollow eyes blinked slowly, almost human. I'm waiting. The room shook faintly, the air vibrating with the growing whispers. The wall seemed to bend slightly, the stone itself humming as if alive. Gervais hissed through clenched teeth, his voice colder, more controlled than before. You can't give them what they want. If you do, they won't stop. They'll tear through everything. Elric's breathing quickened. But if she's really there... She isn't, Gervais snapped, though the thing inside him smiled strangely as he spoke, as if amused by his own words. And if she is, you won't recognize what she becomes. The shadows pulsed violently, their whispers rising into a single deafening chorus. Let us through. The figure in the corner reached forward again, her hand stretching toward him, her voice soft, pleading. Elric, please. His hand hovered in the air, inches from hers. His heart raced, torn between love and fear, between truth and the hope that maybe, just maybe, she was really waiting for him beyond that door. The furnace hissed, the brass bowl glowed brighter, and the air felt like it might tear apart. And as his fingers inched closer to hers, the voices rose to a scream. Elric's fingers trembled as they hovered in the air, just a breath away from touching hers. The room pulsed with a strange rhythm, like a heartbeat echoing through stone. The shadows thickened, curling upward as if eager to witness what came next. The brass bowl on the table glowed like molten gold, its cracked surface humming with energy. Her voice, soft and broken, cut through the chaos. "Elric, please." He wanted to believe it was her, wanted to believe more than anything. His chest felt heavy, aching with all the grief he had carried since she died. What if this was the only chance he would ever have to bring her back? What if he let it slip away, and she was lost forever? But then, just as his hand inched closer, the voice changed. Not hers, but another voice, louder, sharper, echoing through the chamber. "Don't trust it." Elric froze. His heart pounded as he looked around, but he didn't see anyone new. Only Gervais stood there, his eyes glowing faintly, his body still too controlled to be entirely his own. But the words hadn't come from him. Not exactly. The figure in the corner twitched, her shape flickering as if the words had struck her. For a second, her face warped, the edges of her body twisting unnaturally before smoothing back into something human again. Elric stepped back slightly, his hand lowering. "Who said that?" he whispered. The whispers in the room rose, frantic now, 100 voices overlapping, desperate and angry. "Don't listen to them. She's waiting. Take her hand." Gervais tilted his head slowly, watching him. His voice, still not entirely his, spoke with that cold, steady calm. "They're fighting for control. That's what happens when too many try to cross at once." Elric turned to him, his voice trembling. "What are they?" Gervais smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "They're what you asked for. All of them are people who beg for life, beg to come back. Alchemists, kings, peasants, anyone desperate enough to try. They opened the same door you did. And now, they're waiting to step through." Elric's throat tightened. "So they're all dead." "Not just dead," Gervais said quietly. "Changed. Some don't even remember who they were anymore." The figure in the corner tilted her head, her hollow eyes locked on Elric. "I remember," she whispered. Elric's heart lurched at the sound of her voice, so soft and familiar. He wanted to run to her, wanted to believe she was different. But as he stared at her, something caught his attention. Her face twitched again, just for an instant, too fast to be natural. Her mouth pulled into a sharp, wrong smile before smoothing back into a pleading expression. Elric stepped back. "You're not her," he said softly, almost to himself. The figure froze, her empty eyes unblinking. The voices in the room rose sharply, furious now, the shadows thrashing violently along the walls. "Take her hand. Open the door. Don't deny us." Gervais stepped closer to the table, his glowing eyes fixed on the brass bowl. "They're getting stronger. The more you hesitate, the more they fight each other. They'll tear the door open themselves if you let them." Elric's gaze darted to the bowl, to the strange glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. He could feel it, even from across the room, pulling at him. He swallowed hard. This isn't what alchemy was meant to do. Gervais laughed, a short, sharp sound that didn't belong to him. "You think alchemy was ever about turning lead to gold? No, that was the lie, the story for fools and children. Real alchemy was always about this, about crossing the line between life and death." The words hit Elric like a stone. Memories of the monastery flooded back, the old texts hidden in locked cabinets, the warnings whispered by elders about the dangers of deep alchemy. He had dismissed them as superstition, as fear of forbidden knowledge. But now, standing here with the room alive with voices he understood. "How many tried before me?" Elric asked, his voice low. Gervais tilted his head, almost amused. "Thousands. Some succeeded for a time, but it always ended the same way." Elric's chest tightened. "Ow!" The thing smiled, his glowing eyes fixed on Elric. "Once you open the door, They never stopped coming. The words hung in the air like smoke. The voices grew louder, desperate, almost screaming now. Let us through. We can bring her back. You want her, don't you? Elric turned to the figure in the corner again. Her shape wavered like heat over fire, her face twisting between soft sadness and something cruel. For a split second, her hollow eyes flashed with something darker, and he knew. It wasn't her. Not really. His hand shook, his breathing ragged, but he forced the words out. You're not her. You never were. The figure went still, unnaturally still, as if frozen in place. Then her mouth stretched into an awful, too wide smile. The whispers went silent for a heartbeat before rising again, louder than ever, furious now. The walls shook, the brass bowl pulsed with light, and the furnace roared to life on its own. You made a mistake, Gervais said, his voice deeper now, almost echoing as the thing inside him spoke. Once you call us, you don't get to change your mind. Elric's instinct screamed at him to run, but the door behind him still wouldn't budge. He grabbed the handle, pulling hard, but a cold wind slammed it shut again, locking him in. The shadows surged, spilling across the floor like black water, creeping toward him. He stumbled back, his heart pounding, his mind racing for any answer, any way to stop this. Tell me how to close it, he shouted, his voice shaking. If you know so much, tell me. The thing in Gervais tilted his head, his glowing eyes narrowing. Close it. He smiled faintly, almost amused. You can't. Not alone. Elric's chest tightened. There has to be a way. The thing stepped closer, his movements slow, deliberate. There is. But you won't like it. The brass bowl pulsed brighter, the glow turning a deep, bloody red. The voices screamed, furious, desperate, shaking the very walls. The shadows surged faster now, curling around his feet. What way? Elric demanded. The thing smiled wider, leaning closer. If you want to close the door, you have to give it something it doesn't want to let go of. Elric's stomach twisted. What does that mean? The voice in Gervais didn't answer immediately. He leaned in, his glowing eyes locked on Elric, his smile sharp as a blade. You open it with love, monk. You'll only close it with loss. Elric's heart pounded, his breath catching in his throat. The words felt like a weight pressing down on him, heavier than the air itself. And as the shadows wrapped tighter around his legs, the voices screaming louder and louder, he realized the truth. They wanted him to choose. The chamber felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in. The shadows crawled across the floor, curling around Elric's boots like living things, wrapping tighter with every heartbeat. The whispers grew louder, not just around him, but inside him, weaving through his thoughts like threads. Give us what we want. Close it or open it. Choose. You can't leave. Elric's breathing came in quick, shallow bursts. His fingers dug into the wooden doorframe, as if he could tear his way out by force, but he knew it wouldn't open. The air was too heavy, charged with something unnatural, and every instinct screamed that if he made the wrong choice now, there would be no turning back. Gervais, or the thing inside him, watched with unnerving calm. His glowing eyes reflected the flicker of the furnace, his smile sharp, deliberate. You see now, don't you? This isn't about gold or power. This is what alchemy was always meant for, crossing the line no man was meant to cross. Elric turned to him, his jaw tight. Why are you helping them? You're letting them through. The thing tilted Gervais's head slowly, unnaturally, like a puppet considering its strings. Helping? No. I'm simply standing aside. This door was built to open. You are the one who unlocked it. I didn't mean to, Elric said, his voice breaking. The smile widened. No one ever does. The figure in the corner twitched, her form flickering in and out of clarity. Her face, so familiar and yet wrong, shifted between pleading sadness and that too wide, twisted smile. Elric, she whispered again, softer this time, almost human. Please. He wanted to run to her. His heart begged him to. But Gervais's words echoed in his mind. You opened it with love. You'll only close it with loss. The ancient text came back to him then, dusty books locked in the monastery library, pages filled with warnings that no one had truly understood. The monks had spoken of the alchemists of the veil, those who had sought the philosopher's stone not for gold, but to pierce the veil between life and death. Every story had ended in ruin, towns vanishing overnight, entire bloodlines cursed. He had thought they were just cautionary tales to frighten young students. But now he was standing inside one of those tales. His mind raced as he remembered the old margins written in a monk's cramped script. The stone is not gold. The stone is a door. The stone is hungry. His stomach turned. He looked toward the brass bowl, its cracked surface glowing brighter with each passing second, pulsing like something alive. That was their stone, he realized, their doorway. The voices screamed louder, the shadows surging as if sensing his realization. Give us what we want. Finish what you started. Let us through. Elric pressed his back to the door, his voice shaking. How do I close it? Gervais stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate, his glowing eyes fixed on Elric. I told you. Loss. That's the price. You opened it with the strongest bond you had, your love. To close it, you have to sever it completely. Elric's chest tightened. What does that mean? The thing's smile grew wider, sharper. You have to let her go. Not just in your heart, but truly let her go. Destroy every tether that holds her to you. Burn it. Shatter it. Erase her from the place you keep her alive. Elric's hands shook. That's impossible. She's already gone. The figure in the corner moved closer, her hollow eyes fixed on him. Don't listen to him. I'm here. I'm waiting for you. His breath caught. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe so badly. But then, just for a second, her face twisted again, her jaw snapping open too wide, her eyes hollowing into endless black before smoothing back into a soft, pleading expression. His stomach churned. The thing inside Gervais watched him closely, almost curious. If you hesitate much longer, you won't have a choice. They'll rip the door wide open themselves. And once that happens, it won't matter who you love or what you want. They'll all come through. The whispers screamed now, furious, desperate, shaking the very walls. The brass bowl's glow turned from gold to a deep crimson, its cracked edges sparking faintly, as if it might burst. Elric stepped forward, his heart racing. If I destroy the bowl, will it stop them? Gervais tilted his head. It will slow them, but it won't close the door unless you sever what opened it. Elric's hands clenched into fists. You're lying. The thing only smiled wider. Am I? Ask her. He turned sharply to the figure in the corner. She stared at him, silent for a long moment before whispering again. Don't leave me. Elric, please. I'm still here. His chest ached. He wanted to believe her. But the memory of her real smile, the one she used to give him, warm and soft, flashed in his mind. And the face in the corner wasn't smiling like that. The voices rose higher, almost shrieking now, their tones frantic, angry. The shadows surged, spilling across the floor toward him like a black tide. The brass bowl pulsed faster, glowing so brightly it hurt his eyes. The thing inside Gervais stepped back, almost amused, watching. Well, monk, make your choice. Open the door, or close it. Elric stared at the figure, his hands shaking. If I let you go, he whispered, almost to himself, will you forgive me? The figure twitched, her face breaking into that too wide grin again, her hollow eyes burning with something darker. That was his answer. The realization hit him like a weight, crushing the last bit of hope he held. She wasn't here. She never had been. He turned sharply, lunging toward the table. The thing inside Gervais moved, but too slowly. Elric grabbed the brass bowl with both hands, ignoring the heat that seared his palms. The voices screamed, furious, deafening. The shadows lashed out, wrapping around his arms, trying to pull him back, but he held tight. With every ounce of strength left in him, he lifted the bowl and hurled it into the roaring furnace. The moment it struck the flames, the room exploded with sound. The whispers turned into a single, furious scream. The shadows writhed violently, thrashing against the walls, curling and twisting as if in agony. The furnace roared brighter, swallowing the bowl in a blaze of light. The figure in the corner shrieked, her face twisting into something monstrous, her hollow eyes burning red before her body dissolved into smoke. The thing inside Gervais staggered back, his glowing eyes flickering. His voice grew strained, layered with multiple tones. "You fool! You can't undo it that easily." Elric pressed his back to the wall, shielding his face from the blinding light as the room shook violently. The walls cracked, stone dust raining from the ceiling. The voices grew weaker, their screams fading into distant whispers. The shadows pulled back, retreating toward the corners, thinner now, less solid. But just as relief began to wash over him, Gervais turned, his glowing eyes still burning, his expression twisted with rage. "You think you closed it?" the thing hissed. "You only bought yourself time. The door is still open, monk." And now, they're angry. The furnace hissed, the light dimming, but the air in the chamber still felt heavy, alive. The walls pulsed faintly, almost as if breathing. And then, in the silence that followed, a single voice whispered, soft and almost playful. "We're still here." The silence after the scream felt worse than the noise. The chamber held its breath, the shadows now only faint smudges in the corners, but Elric could still feel them watching. The air carried a low hum, barely audible, like the aftershock of something waiting to come back. His hands burned where he had touched the brass bowl, his palms blistered and red, but he didn't care. He stared at the furnace, at the ashes where the bowl had cracked and melted, hoping it meant he had done something right. But the whisper still lingered in his mind. "We're still here." Elric backed toward the door, his breath heavy, but still wouldn't open. The wood felt warm now, pulsing faintly under his palm like a living thing. He yanked harder, desperation clawing at him, but stayed shut. Gervais stood a few feet away, his posture unnaturally straight, his glowing eyes dimmer now, but still wrong, still holding that thing inside him. His smile had faded, replaced by a cold stare. "You've made it worse," the voice said quietly, too calm for what had just happened. "They won't stop now. Not until they get what they want." Elric turned sharply. "Then tell me how to stop them completely." The thing inside Gervais tilted his head. "You already know how." "I destroyed the bowl," Elric said firmly. "That wasn't the door," the voice said. "That was only the key. The door is still open. They can crawl through cracks, even without the key, as long as it stays open." Elric's hands trembled. "Then how do I close it?" The thing stepped closer, its movements deliberate, almost slow enough to seem mocking. "I told you. Loss. You opened it with love, with a bond that tied you to us. To close it, you must sever it completely. Not just destroying the tool. Not just saying the words. You have to mean it. You have to let her go forever." Elric's chest tightened, his throat dry. The memory of her face, real, soft, alive, flashed in his mind. The thought of letting that go, of accepting she was gone for good, felt impossible. "She's already dead," he said, almost to himself. The thing smiled faintly. "But not to you. Not yet. That's why they came. They feed on the ones who can't let go." The words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. He looked away, his hands clenching. "I loved her. I still do. But I didn't ask for this." The voice inside Gervais gave a quiet laugh, humorless and sharp. "No one ever does. But wanting someone enough to call them back is the strongest invitation there is." The whispers stirred again, faint at first, like rustling leaves, then slowly growing louder. The shadows pulsed in the corners, stretching just slightly, as if testing the space. Elric stepped back, his eyes darting around. "They're coming back." Gervais didn't move, his glowing eyes watching Elric closely. "Because you're still hesitating. You can't fool them. They know you're not ready to let go." Elric felt his chest tighten painfully. He didn't know what to do. Part of him wanted to run, to claw at the door until his fingers bled, to escape this room and never look back. But another part of him couldn't stop thinking about her voice, soft and broken, calling his name. The whispers rose higher, overlapping, more voices joining in, some begging, some demanding. "You want her. Take her. You open the door for love. Finish it. Let us through." The shadows crept closer across the floor, crawling like spilled ink. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the air. The stone wall to the left of the furnace shifted slightly, a thin line opening in the surface, glowing faintly red like embers. Elric stared, his stomach twisting. "They're breaking through," Gervais said calmly, almost as if admiring it. "The longer you wait, the easier it gets for them." Elric's eyes darted to the crack, which widened slowly, dust falling from the stone. Shapes moved just beyond it, dark and shifting, pressing against the barrier as if trying to force their way in. He turned back to Gervais, desperation in his voice. "If I do what you're saying, if I let go, will they leave?" The thing's smile returned, cold and sharp. "For now." Elric swallowed hard, his hands trembling. His mind raced, torn between fear and the ache of love that still held him trapped. The whisper of her voice returned, soft and almost sad. "Elric, don't let me go." His heart ached so deeply it felt like a physical wound. "She's not real," he whispered to himself. "She's gone." The shadows hissed in response, their voices rising, angry now. "Liar. You want her. You called us for her." The crack in the wall widened further, the stone bending unnaturally as if pushed by something massive on the other side. A hand-shaped shadow pressed against it, long fingers curling against the surface before fading back. Elric's breathing quickened. He looked around the room, trying to think, try to remember anything he had read in those old texts that could help him. One phrase came to mind, written in faded ink on the edge of a page. "A door opened by longing is sealed only by surrender." His chest tightened. Surrender. Letting go wasn't just saying it. It meant truly giving up the one thing that had kept him moving all these years. It meant losing her forever. The whispers softened for a moment, almost coaxing now. "You don't have to. We can give her back." Gervais's glowing eyes watched him, unblinking. "Choose fast, monk. That crack won't hold much longer." Elric's hands shook, his mind racing, torn apart by the weight of his choice. And then, suddenly, another sound joined the chaos. A muffled pounding from somewhere beyond the chamber, rhythmic, human. Elric froze, his head snapping toward the door. The pounding grew louder. Someone was outside. A voice shouted faintly, muffled by the thick wood. "Brother Elric, are you inside? Open the door." It was a monk, one of the others from the monastery. Elric's heart jumped. Help! Someone had come looking for him. But before he could respond, Gervais stepped between him and the door, his glowing eyes narrowing. "If they open that door," the thing said, its voice low and dangerous, "they'll be pulled in too. The door doesn't care who crosses. It only wants more." The pounding continued, louder now. "Elric, are you there? What's happening? Open the door." The shadows stirred at the sound, their whispers rising again, hungry now. More voices. More life. "Let us in." The crack in the wall widened another inch, the glowing red light spilling brighter into the chamber. Dark shapes pressed harder against it, their forms writhing in anticipation. Elric stared at the door, his chest tight. He couldn't let anyone else in here. He couldn't let them get pulled into this nightmare. But the monks outside didn't know. They would keep trying to break through. And if they did, the thing inside Gervais tilted his head, his sharp smile returning. "You have no time left, monk. Either close it now, or watch them all come through." Elric's heart pounded in his chest, every second heavier than the last. The voices screamed louder, the walls shaking, the shadows stretching toward him, toward the door. And the pounding outside didn't stop. The pounding on the door grew louder, more desperate, shaking the wooden frame. "Elric, open this door right now," another voice shouted. There were two of them now, maybe more, and their footsteps echoed in the narrow stone hallway outside. Elric pressed his back against the door as if his weight alone could keep it closed. "Go back," he shouted, his voice raw. "You don't understand. You can't be here." The voices outside didn't stop. The monks sounded confused, alarmed. One of them slammed something heavy against the wood, trying to force it open. The whispers inside the room rose to a fever pitch, swirling like a storm. "More life. Open it for us. Bring them through." The crack in the wall split wider with a sharp, tearing sound, sending chunks of stone crumbling to the floor. A faint, cold wind seeped from it, carrying a smell that was damp and metallic, like old blood. The dark shapes behind it writhed, pressing harder now, their claws scratching against the stone. Gervais stepped closer to Elric, his glowing eyes fixed on the door. "You're running out of time, monk. If they break that door, the ones on the other side won't stand a chance. You can't protect them and cling to her at the same time." Elric's breathing quickened, panic rising in his chest. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted her back." The thing inside Gervais smiled faintly, almost pitying. "And now you're going to lose more than just her if you don't choose." The voices outside grew louder. "Elric, open it. Are you hurt? We'll get you out." Elric's stomach twisted. He couldn't let them in. They didn't know the danger, and once they stepped inside, there would be no way to save them. He pressed his palms against the door, shouting again, "Stay back. Don't open it." But the monks outside weren't listening. Another heavy thud hit the wood, making it shudder. The latch was old, and if they kept at it, it would give way. The whispers swirled faster now, more frantic, almost excited. "Yes, more voices. They'll feed us well. Let us through." The crack in the wall widened another inch with a sickening snap. For a split second, a hand-like shadow pushed through, its long fingers curling, scraping at the air before retreating. Elric turned back to Gervais, his voice desperate. "Tell me how to stop this right now." The glowing eyes blinked slowly. "You already know. You have to let her go completely. You have to cut the bond you called them with. Every piece of it." Elric shook his head. "I can't not like this." The thing's smile faded. "Then they'll come through. And when they do, you'll lose far more than her." The pounding outside grew violent now. The monks shouted, their voices frantic. "Stand back. We're breaking it open." Elric's mind raced. He couldn't let them in. He couldn't let those things take anyone else. His hands trembled as he pressed harder against the door, shouting, "Don't. You'll die if you come in." But the words didn't stop them. The whispers screamed now, louder than the monks, filling every corner of the room. The shadows stretched across the floor, curling toward the door as if reaching for it. And then, through all the chaos, her voice came again, soft and desperate. "Elric, don't leave me. Please. I'm still here." His heart ached at the sound. He squeezed his eyes shut, fighting the tears that burned behind them. I can't lose you again." Gervais stepped closer, his voice cold. "Then everyone else will pay for your choice." The crack in the wall tore wider with a deafening snap, glowing red light spilling into the room. Something massive pressed against it now, its shape still hidden, but its weight was enough to bend the stone as if it were clay. Elric turned back to the figure in the corner. She stood motionless, her hollow eyes fixed on him, her trembling hands reaching out. For a moment, just a heartbeat, she almost looked like herself again, fragile, human, real. "Elric," she whispered, softer than before. "You promised you wouldn't leave me." His chest tightened painfully. His hands shook as he stared at her, torn between love and fear, between the memory of who she was and the nightmare standing in front of him now. The monks outside slammed against the door again, the wood creaking under the force. One more hit, maybe two, and it would break. The whispers screamed, furious and hungry. "Open it. Bring them in. Let us feed." Gervais's glowing eyes stayed locked on him, waiting, patient, as if he already knew what Elric would do. Elric's heart pounded, his breathing ragged. He knew there wasn't much time left. He looked at the figure again, his voice breaking. "If I do this, if I let you go, will you forgive me?" The figure's face twitched, too fast to be natural, before settling into a sad smile. "Don't let me go." The crack in the wall split wider with a loud, tearing sound. A massive shape moved behind it now, closer, almost through. The door behind Elric groaned as the monks hit it again, splinters cracking along the edges. And then, in the middle of the chaos, something inside Elric shifted. He saw her face, her real face, the one he remembered. Her soft smile, the warmth in her eyes, the way she had looked at him before any of this had happened. She wouldn't want this. Not this horror, not at the cost of others. His chest ached as he whispered to himself, "I'm sorry." The whispers screamed louder, furious now, shaking the walls. The shadows surged, the crack in the wall glowing like fire. The monks slammed into the door again, the wood splitting at the hinges. Elric pressed his back against the door one last time, his voice hoarse. "Go back. Don't open it." The monks shouted from the other side, ignoring him, pushing harder. Elric looked toward the figure one last time. Her hollow eyes stared at him, her outstretched hands trembling. Her lips parted, forming his name. "Elric!" His chest felt like it was tearing apart, but he forced the words out, his voice breaking. "You're gone, and I have to let you go." The room went still for a split second. The whispers stopped, silent as a hell breath. Then everything erupted at once. The shadows writhed violently, screaming in rage. The crack in the wall pulsed, the shapes behind it thrashing as if trying to push through. The furnace roared, flames spilling brighter. The figure in the corner shrieked, her face twisting into something monstrous, her hollow eyes burning red before her body shattered into smoke, dissolving into nothing. The voices screamed, furious. "No, you can't shut us out. We're still here." The crack in the wall began to close slowly, the glowing light dimming as if being pulled back. The shadows thrashed, clawing at the stone, trying to hold it open, but inch by inch it sealed. Elric fell to his knees, his hands pressed against the cold stone floor, his chest heaving. The monks outside hit the door one last time, and with a sharp crack, it burst open. Two figures stumbled into the room, their faces pale and confused, their eyes widening at the sight of the chaos. But the room was still alive. The shadows hadn't vanished completely. They twisted in the corners, whispering low, angry. And in that moment of silence, one soft voice slipped through the fading noise, almost too quiet to hear. "You may have closed the door, monk, but we're not gone." The two monks stood frozen in the doorway, their breaths quick, their faces pale as they took in the ruined chamber. The furnace still roared with embers, glowing against the cracked stone. The air felt heavy, alive, humming with something unseen. Shadows curled faintly in the corners, twitching as if restless, not entirely gone. Brother Matthew, the younger of the two, took a hesitant step forward, his eyes darting nervously to the walls. "Elric, what have you done?" His voice trembled, a mix of fear and confusion. The older monk, Brother Simeon, frowned deeply, his hands tightening on the staff he carried. "This place feels wrong," he said, his voice low. His sharp eyes scanned the chamber, lingering on the faint red cracks, still glowing faintly in the stone. "What have you brought into our monastery?" Elric stayed on his knees, his hands resting limply on the floor, his chest rising and falling heavily. He didn't look up. His voice came out hoarse, almost broken. "You shouldn't have come in." Matthew's gaze darted toward the corner, where a patch of shadow shifted slightly, curling upward before slinking back down. His face drained of color. "What is that?" Simeon took a protective step in front of Matthew, raising his staff slightly, as if it would do anything against the thing moving in the dark. "Elric, answer me. What is this?" Elric finally looked up, his eyes hollow, his face pale from exhaustion and grief. "I try to close it," he whispered. "I try to stop them." "Stop who?" Matthew's voice cracked, his wide eyes fixed on the twitching shadows. "They're alchemists," Elric said, his words soft but heavy. "Not just alchemists, everything that ever tried to come back. They've been waiting, trapped on the other side of the door. I opened it by mistake." Simeon's jaw tightened. "You meddled with forbidden texts, didn't you? The ones we locked away." Elric lowered his head. He couldn't deny it. Matthew took another shaky step back toward the door. "We have to leave. Now, before whatever this is." A sudden hiss echoed from the corner, cutting him off. The shadows writhed violently for a moment, like something thrashing just beneath the surface. The whispering began again, soft at first, then growing louder, overlapping voices layered on top of each other. More life, new voices fresh. "Let us in." Matthew froze, his face pale as he stared into the dark. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Simeon gripped his staff tighter, stepping back slightly, his body tense. "Elric, you said you closed it. Why are they still here?" Elric pushed himself to his feet slowly, his legs trembling. He stared at the cracks in the wall, which glowed faintly, like dying embers. The door is shut, but it's not sealed. They're still clinging to what's left of it. They won't give up until it's completely gone. Matthew looked horrified. Then how do we make it go away? Elric's gaze dropped to the floor, his jaw tight. I already told you. I had to let her go. I tried, but maybe it wasn't enough. The voices hissed louder, as if mocking him. You still want her. You didn't give her up. You lied. Elric's chest tightened. He wanted to shout that it wasn't true, that he had chosen to let her go, but deep down, the ache in his heart still lingered. He still loved her. Maybe the door could feel that. Simeon moved closer to him, his sharp gaze locked on Elric. If this is about some woman you lost, you need to finish whatever you started. Do you understand? This is no longer just your sin. It's threatening us all. Elric nodded slowly, his voice low. I know. The furnace flickered, its light dimming slightly, casting longer shadows against the walls. One of those shadows stretched unnaturally, curling upward along the stone, forming a hand-like shape. Matthew stumbled back, his voice shaking. It's moving. The shadow hand twitched, fingers curling as if testing the air. The whispers rose sharply, excited. New blood, let us in. Simeon stepped in front of Matthew, raising his staff. His voice was firm, but Elric could hear the edge of fear in it. You need to finish this now, Elric. Before they crossed through, Elric stared at the moving shadow, his heart pounding. He had thought throwing the brass bowl into the furnace would be enough, but the door had been built with more than just tools. It had been built with him, with his longing, his refusal to let go. He realized then that simply choosing to let her go wasn't enough. The bond still lived inside him, deep in his heart. The door was still tied to him. Elric closed his eyes, his hands trembling. He had to do more. The whispers grew louder, mocking now, cruel. You can't let her go. You love her too much. She's still yours. Elric clenched his fists, his teeth grinding. No, he whispered, his voice trembling. She's gone. The shadows hissed, writhing violently at his words. Simeon watched him closely, stepping nearer. Whatever you need to do it quickly. Elric opened his eyes, his gaze fixed on the furnace. The old text had spoken of burning the tether, destroying everything that tied the soul to the door. That meant not just the tools, not just the ritual, but every memory, every symbol he kept of her. His heart sank. In his pocket, tucked close to his chest, was the only thing he had left of her, a simple silver pendant she had given him before she died. He had carried it every day since, holding on to it like a lifeline. His fingers moved toward it slowly, hesitating as they brushed against the cool metal. The whispers hissed sharply, angry now. No, not that. You wouldn't. She gave it to you. Elric's hand trembled as he pulled the pendant out, staring at it in the flickering furnace light. It was scratched and worn, but to him, it was everything. Matthew stared at it, confused. What's that? Elric didn't answer. His chest felt heavy, like someone was pressing a stone against it. He looked down at the pendant, memories flashing in his mind. Her smile, her laughter, the way she had held his hand. He didn't want to do it. Every part of him screamed not to. But the crack in the wall pulsed faintly, the shadows writhing more violently, reaching closer. The voices screamed, Don't let it go. You need it. She's still here. Simeon took a step toward him, his voice firm. If that's what's keeping them here, you know what you have to do. Elric's grip tightened around the pendant. His chest ached so badly he could barely breathe. Matthew stepped closer, his voice soft, almost pleading. Brother, you have to. Elric stared at the furnace, his mind spinning. The whispers screamed louder, desperate now. The shadows stretched closer, curling around the edges of the furnace as if trying to stop him. His hand trembled as he lifted the pendant over the flames. For a heartbeat, he hesitated. His entire body screamed in protest. And then, with tears streaming down his face, he opened his hand. The pendant slipped from his fingers, falling into the roaring flames. The whispers erupted into furious screams, shaking the walls. The shadows writhed violently, thrashing as if in pain. The crack in the wall glowed brighter for a moment before beginning to seal, the stone pulling together slowly. But even as the light dimmed, even as the furnace roared, one whisper rose above the rest, soft, almost amused. "You think this is over, monk, but the door remembers you." Elric fell to his knees again, his hands pressed against the cold floor, his chest heaving. The chamber shook once more before slowly, painfully, beginning to grow quiet. But the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like waiting. The silence that followed felt wrong, almost too heavy, as if the chamber itself was holding its breath. The furnace crackled quietly, the last flickers of the pendant glowing among the embers before disappearing into ash. The faint glow from the cracked wall faded, the stones slowly knitting together, but Elric didn't move. He stayed on his knees, his hands flat against the cold floor, his chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths. Brother Simeon stood near him, his staff still raised, his sharp eyes scanning the corners of the room. The older monk's jaw was tight, his body tense, as if expecting something to lunge out of the shadows at any moment. Matthew lingered behind him, his face pale, his wide eyes darting nervously from wall to wall. For a moment, it seemed like it might be over. The air felt a little lighter, the humming in the stone softer, almost fading. And then, faintly, almost like a whisper carried on the wind, a voice slipped through the quiet. "Still here." Matthew flinched, stepping back sharply. "Did you hear that?" Simeon's grip on his staff tightened, his jaw set. "Stay close to me." The whisper came again, louder this time, weaving through the chamber like a thread pulling taut. "You think you shut us out, but you didn't." The shadows in the farthest corner twitched. Slowly, almost lazily, they began to stretch, crawling upward along the stone walls like spilled ink. Elric looked up finally, his eyes heavy with exhaustion but widening as he saw the movement. "No," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "The door's closed. You can't be here." The whisper laughed softly, the sound low and unsettling. "We don't need the door to stay if we've already touched you." Simeon turned sharply to Elric. "What does that mean?" Elric's heart sank as realization hit him. His hands trembled as he whispered, "I called them. I opened the door. They know me now. I'm still tied to them." The shadows curled tighter in the corner, forming strange, twisting shapes, as if something unseen was trying to push its way into being. The temperature dropped sharply, a thin mist curling at the edges of the floor. Matthew stepped back again, panic creeping into his voice. "We have to leave. We can't stay in here." Simeon didn't move. His sharp gaze stayed on Elric. "Is there any way to end this completely?" Elric's breathing quickened. He shook his head slowly. "I don't know. The text never said what happens if they've already touched you. I thought letting go would close it. But if I'm still their anchor..." The whisper interrupted, louder now, almost playful. "You are ours, monk. We don't need the door if you're still open." The shadows twisted violently, spreading across the floor, curling around Elric's knees. He scrambled back, his heart pounding. "No, you can't have me." The furnace roared suddenly, flames rising higher, as if reacting to the voices. The shadows hissed at the light, writhing back for a moment before creeping closer again, more determined. Simeon swung his staff toward the shadows, though it passed right through them. "Elric, think. If you're their anchor, how do you break that link?" Elric's mind raced, his chest tight. I don't know. The only way to break a bond in alchemy is to destroy the vessel that carries it." Matthew's voice shook. "What does that mean?" Elric swallowed hard, his hands trembling as the truth sank in. "It means me." Matthew stared at him, horrified. "No, you can't mean." The shadows surged suddenly, lashing out like black tendrils, curling around the legs of the monks. Matthew cried out as one wrapped tightly around his ankle, pulling him toward the corner. Simeon struck at it with his staff, but it passed harmlessly through. The whispers rose into a frenzy, excited now. Yes, more life, more voices. Simeon grabbed Matthew, pulling hard, his jaw tight. "Elric, do something." Elric scrambled to his feet, his mind spinning. He couldn't let them take anyone else. But if the link was truly through him, if they could only stay because of him. The voices hissed louder, almost taunting. You won't give yourself to stop us. You still want to live." Elric's chest heaved. He looked at the furnace, at the roaring flames. His stomach twisted as the thought formed in his mind. Could that be enough? The shadows pulled harder, dragging Matthew inch by inch toward the far wall, toward the dark corner that now seemed to pulse with life. His terrified cries filled the room as he clawed at the stone floor. Simeon strained to hold on to him, his face red with effort. "Elric, now!" The whispers laughed cruelly. "You can't do it. You'll let them take him instead." Elric's heart pounded so hard it hurt. He couldn't let them be right. He took a shaky step toward the furnace, his mind screaming at him to stop, but his legs moved anyway. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of the furnace, feeling the heat burn his skin. The shadows hissed sharply, almost panicked now, sensing what he was about to do. "No, you wouldn't." The voices rose in a chorus of angry, desperate whispers. "We'll give her back. We'll give her to you." Elric's chest tightened, tears streaming down his face. He could almost hear her voice again, soft and pleading like before. "Elric, don't leave me." For a split second, he froze. His body screamed to stop, to step away. The shadows surged closer, trying to pull him back, wrapping around his ankles now, cold and suffocating. Matthew screamed again, dragged another inch toward the wall. Simeon shouted his name, struggling to hold him. Elric clenched his teeth, his voice breaking as he shouted back at the whispering voices, "She's gone." The furnace roared higher, flames licking upward as if answering him. The shadows screamed, pulling harder at him, trying to drag him away. Elric took another step closer to the furnace, his hands gripping the burning edge tighter, the heat searing his skin. He could feel the pull of the shadows, the weight of every whisper clawing at his mind, tempting him to stop. And then, in one sharp breath, he leaned forward. But before he could move fully, the shadows erupted in a violent surge, slamming him backward, throwing him to the floor. He hit the ground hard, his vision blurring for a moment. The voices screamed, furious, louder than before. "You're ours, monk. You can't run from us." The crack in the wall glowed faintly again, pulsing as if something was trying to break through once more. Simeon shouted, pulling Matthew away just as the tendrils lashed harder, twisting violently in frustration. The air grew colder, thicker, every shadow in the room stretching and twisting unnaturally, moving as if alive. Elric pushed himself up slowly, his body shaking, his burned hands trembling. His chest heaved as he stared at the furnace, then at the shadows curling around the room like snakes. The voices hissed, almost gleeful now. "You can't escape, monk. You can't kill what you invited." The crack in the wall pulsed brighter, the stone trembling as if about to split again. Elric's breathing grew ragged. His heart pounded. He knew he had only moments before they pushed through completely. And this time, he might not have another chance to stop them. The chamber felt like it was collapsing in on itself, the air thick and heavy, humming with the strange, unnatural energy of the thing pushing against the walls. The crack in the stone pulsed brighter, glowing an angry red as dust rained down from above. The shadows spread farther, curling across the floor, stretching like black roots toward every corner of the room. Matthew screamed again as one tendril wrapped around his arm, pulling him closer to the wall. Simeon held on to him with both arms, his muscles straining as he dug his heels into the stone floor. "Elric," he shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. "Whatever you're going to do, do it now." Elric pushed himself to his feet, his burned hands shaking, his breath coming fast and shallow. His mind raced, every instinct screaming at him to run, but there was nowhere to run, and he knew it. The thing wasn't just here in this room. It was tied to him. It would follow him. It would follow anyone he left behind. The whispers rose in a deafening chorus, some pleading, some mocking, their words slamming into his mind like blows. "You can't stop us. We're already inside you. You opened the door. You belong to us." The crack in the wall split wider with a sickening tearing sound. Something massive moved behind it now, a shifting darkness pressing against the stone. A long, clawed shape pushed through for a moment before sliding back, leaving deep scratches on the rock. Elric stumbled closer to the furnace, his body trembling. He could feel the heat radiating from it, searing against his already blistered skin. He stared into the flames, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. The voices hissed louder, angrier now. You can't give yourself to the fire. You need to live. You need her. And then, soft and clear, her voice broke through the noise. Elric, don't leave me again. Please. You promised. His chest tightened so painfully it felt like his ribs would crack. For a split second, he saw her again, standing in the corner. Not the hollow, twisted thing from before, but her as she had been, warm, kind, alive. Her soft eyes met his, filled with sadness. He shook his head hard, his voice breaking. You're not real. You're not her. The image wavered, flickered, and then she spoke again, her tone desperate. I am real. I'm still here. You just have to let me back in. The shadows hissed in agreement, twisting around him, curling at his feet. She's waiting for you. She's just beyond the door. We can give her back. Elric's hands tightened into fists. His heart screamed to believe it, to hold on to her, to choose her over everything else. But deep down, he knew the truth. That wasn't her voice. It never had been. Simeon grunted with effort as he pulled against the tendrils wrapping around Matthew. Elric, he shouted again, his voice cutting through the noise. In this, Elric looked at the two monks struggling against the shadows, at the terror in Matthew's eyes. He had caused this. His love, his weakness, had opened the door. And if he didn't stop it now, these men, innocent men, would die because of him. The crack in the wall split wider with a sharp, echoing crack, glowing red light spilling into the chamber. The stone floor trembled under his feet. The massive shape behind the wall pressed harder, its clawed hands scraping against the stone as it tried to push through. The voices grew frenzied, screaming now. We're almost through. You can't stop us. You're ours. Elric's chest heaved as he stepped closer to the furnace, the heat unbearable now. His burned hands hovered over the flames, the skin already blistering, peeling. He could feel the fire pulling at him, almost inviting him in. The shadows hissed angrily, whipping around him, trying to pull him back. One tendril lashed around his leg, tugging hard, but he pushed forward, his teeth clenched, dragging himself closer inch by inch. The whispers screamed in rage. You'll die for nothing. Even if you burn, we'll still find another way. Elric ignored them. His heart pounded, his breathing ragged. His entire body shook as he looked into the furnace, into the roaring flames that seemed to reach higher the closer he got. Her voice came again, soft, pleading, breaking through everything else. Please, Elric, don't do this. You can still save me. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered back. You're already gone, and I won't let anyone else die for me. The shadows screamed in fury, wrapping tighter around him, pulling with violent force. But he kept moving, dragging himself toward the fire. Simeon shouted his name again, his voice filled with both fear and desperate hope. Matthew screamed as another tendril yanked him closer to the wall, his hands clawing at the floor. The crack in the wall split even wider, a clawed hand pushing through completely now, scraping along the stone floor. The thing behind the wall roared, a deep, guttural sound that shook the room. The shadows surged all at once, dozens of tendrils lashing toward Elric, wrapping around his arms, his chest, trying to pull him back. The furnace roared louder, the flames rising almost unnaturally high, lighting the chamber in bright orange and red. Elric tightened his grip on the edge of the furnace, his burned hands slipping slightly against the hot metal. His body shook violently as the shadows pulled harder, his muscles straining against them. The whispers screamed in one final desperate cry. She's waiting for you. Don't leave her. Elric's teeth clenched as he shouted over the noise, his voice hoarse and raw. She's gone. And with that, he leaned forward, pulling himself closer to the roaring fire, the heat scorching his skin. The shadows shrieked, their voices rising into a deafening scream. The tendrils pulled harder, almost tearing at his limbs, desperate to stop him. Simeon shouted again, his voice almost lost in the chaos. Matthew's terrified cries echoed as the clawed hand from the crack slammed against the stone, pushing harder, almost through. The entire chamber shook violently, dust raining from the ceiling, the furnace flames whipping higher, brighter, almost white-hot. Elric's face twisted in pain, his eyes squeezed shut, his body trembling as the heat wrapped around him like a living thing. The shadows shrieked again, their voices layered, chaotic. "Don't do it! You'll kill us all. You belong to us." But Elric didn't stop. Inch by inch, he forced himself closer to the fire, the flames licking at his hands, his arms, searing his skin. The crack in the wall glowed brighter, pulsing violently as the massive shape behind it pushed harder, its clawed hands scraping the stone, trying to drag itself fully through. The monks could only watch, frozen in terror, as Elric's body leaned farther, closer to the roaring fire, the tendrils pulling, the whispers screaming, the walls trembling. And just as the flames surged their highest and the crack split with a loud, echoing snap, everything in the chamber froze for a single breath. For a heartbeat, the chamber stood still, as if time itself had been caught between breaths. The shadows froze mid-thrash, tendrils hanging in the air like ink suspended in water. The clawed hand pushing through the cracks stopped moving, its long fingers pressed against the stone as though waiting. Even the furnace seemed to hesitate, its flames flickering strangely, their roar dimming into a soft hum. Elric stayed crouched by the furnace, his blistered hands gripping the edge, his face twisted in pain. His breath came in ragged gasps, his whole body trembling. But for the first time since this began, the voices had gone silent. Then, breaking the quiet, a new sound rose, a soft, rhythmic tapping like footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing faintly from somewhere beyond the crack in the wall. The clawed hand twitched once, then froze again, almost as if even the thing behind the wall was listening. The shadows whispered, softer now, almost reverent. "He's coming." Elric's stomach sank, his grip tightening on the furnace edge. "Oh," he whispered, his voice hoarse. The whispers overlapped, no longer chaotic, but united, almost chanting. "The one who taught us, the first to open the door. He remembers you, monk." Matthew whimpered, still struggling against the tendrils binding his arm. Simeon's sharp gaze darted to Elric, his voice low and tense. "What are they talking about?" Elric shook his head slowly, his eyes wide. There's no one else. There can't be." But even as he said it, a memory flickered in his mind, unbidden. The old texts he had read, the strange symbols written in the margins by a different hand, notes from someone who had tried these rituals centuries ago. He had dismissed them then, thinking them nothing but the ravings of a desperate alchemist. But now he realized those words had not been warnings. They had been instructions. The slow footsteps grew louder, closer, echoing from the other side of the wall. A faint light flickered from the crack, not the dull red glow of before, but a cold bluish shimmer. The clawed hand on the stone twitched again, almost pulling back slightly, as if even a monstrous thing behind the wall feared whoever was coming. The shadows curled tighter around Elric, their whispers rising again, trembling with something like excitement. "He's here. The master is coming. You called him without knowing." Elric's heart pounded painfully in his chest. "No," he whispered to himself. "I didn't call anyone else. I only wanted her." The whispers laughed softly, almost kindly. "You use his words, monk, his symbols. Every time you trace them, you open his door." Simeon's eyes narrowed. "Elric, what are they saying? Who is this?" Before Elric could answer, a new voice echoed from the crack in the wall, deep and calm, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "So this is the one who took my words." Every shadow in the room froze. Even the tendrils holding Matthew stilled for a heartbeat. Elric's chest tightened painfully, his body rigid. The voice was steady, almost polite, but something in it felt wrong, like the sound of a smile that didn't reach the eyes. The blue light from the crack brightened, casting strange, shifting shapes on the walls. The clawed hand still pressed against the stone trembled slightly, then slowly withdrew back into the glowing fissure, leaving deep scratches in the rock. The whispers shifted, no longer angry, but almost worshipful. "The Master, he's here." Elric forced himself to speak, his voice strained. "Who are you?" The voice chuckled softly, a low sound that made the air feel heavier. "Names are for men who still care about the living. But you may call me what they did once, Magister Veil. The first to cross the veil. The one who learned that life is only clay to be shaped." Elric's stomach turned. Magister Veil. He had read that name once, buried deep in a dusty, half-burned book, whispered among alchemists as a myth. A man who had vanished centuries ago after claiming he could reshape the soul. No one had ever proven he was real. But now he was speaking through the crack. Simeon tightened his grip on his staff, his face grim. "What does he want?" The voice answered before Elric could. "I want him, of course. The monk who reached for life and tore the door open for me." The shadows stirred restlessly at his words, as if bowing to him. The tendrils around Elric's legs tightened, pulling him slightly toward the wall. Elric struggled against them, his voice sharp, almost panicked. "You're lying. I didn't open anything for you." The voice laughed again, low and amused. "Didn't you? You used my symbols, my methods. You begged the door to give you what you lost. And when you begged, you gave me the one thing I needed, permission." Matthew cried out, his voice trembling. "Don't let him through. Whatever he is, don't let him in." Simeon kept his eyes locked on Elric. "You're the one who started this. Can you stop it before he gets through?" Elric's chest heaved, his mind racing. The door had been for the restless, for the things clawing at it for centuries. But Magister Veil, he wasn't like them. He wasn't trapped there by accident. He had chosen to be on the other side, and now he was using Elric to finish what he started long ago. The furnace behind him roared suddenly, as if reacting to the tension, the flames turning strangely pale, almost white. The voice from the crack grew quieter, almost soothing. "You don't need to fight me, Elric. You wanted the same thing I did. You wanted to bring someone back. Let me help you finish it." For a second, the thought slammed into Elric's chest like a blow. What if he wasn't lying? What if Magister Veil really could do what he had failed to do? What if he could bring her back? Not as the twisted shadow that had begged him before, but truly alive again. The whispers seemed to sense his hesitation, swirling around him, echoing his secret longing. "Yes, listen to him. He can give her back. All you have to do is let him through." Elric's burned hands tightened on the edge of the furnace. His heart screamed to stop, to ignore the voice, but another part of him, the desperate, grieving part, ached to believe it. Simeon stepped closer, his voice sharp, pulling Elric back to the moment. "Don't listen to him. He's using you. You know that." Elric swallowed hard, his throat tight. He wanted to shout that he knew, but his body wouldn't move. His heart pounded painfully, torn between the truth and the hope he had longed for since she died. The voice grew softer, more persuasive, almost kind. "You don't need to die, monk. You don't need to throw yourself into the fire. Just step away, and I will finish it for you." She will open her eyes again, and she will smile for you. You don't even need to lift a hand. The crack in the wall pulsed brighter, the blue light spreading across the stone. The fissure widened slowly, silently, as if waiting for his answer. Matthew cried out again as the tendrils around his arm tightened, pulling him closer to the wall. Simeon held on, his teeth clenched, his eyes fixed on Elric. "He's lying, Elric. Think. Look at what he's already done." Elric's heart raced. He could feel every pair of eyes in the room, human and not, fixed on him, waiting for his choice. The furnace roared higher behind him, its white-hot flames licking the air as if urging him forward. The crack glowed brighter with every second, the blue light reflecting off the walls, cold and unnatural. The voice spoke one last time, calm and certain. "Choose, monk. Will you burn for nothing, or will you open the door and take back what you lost?" Elric stared at the furnace, then at the crack in the wall where the faint shape of a man stood silhouetted in the blue light, waiting. The entire chamber held its breath, frozen on the edge of his decision. The chamber felt alive, pulsing with every beat of Elric's heart. The shadows stirred in restless waves, whispering frantically now, their tones a strange mix of fear and eagerness. The blue glow from the widening crack bathed the stone walls in cold light, throwing strange patterns across the floor. The furnace roared behind him, its flames snapping like a wild animal, its heat biting at his burned skin. Magister Vale's silhouette grew clearer within the crack, tall and unnaturally still. His voice came again, soft but carrying through the room as if he were standing right behind Elric. "You have only moments, monk. The door will seal again if you hesitate. Once it closes, she will be gone forever." Elric's chest tightened, his eyes locked on the flickering blue light. The thought of never seeing her again slammed into him like a blow. His fingers tightened against the edge of the furnace, the burns on his hands throbbing, but his legs stayed rooted in place. Matthew struggled against the tendrils coiling around his arm, his terrified voice cracking. "Don't listen to him. Don't you dare listen to him." His words were desperate, but they were drowned out by the louder, more tempting whispers swirling through the room. "He's right. She's waiting for you. You love her too much to let her go forever. Just one step back, just one choice, and she's yours again." Simeon gritted his teeth, still holding on to Matthew with one hand while gripping his staff with the other. His sharp gaze stayed locked on Elric, unwavering despite the chaos. "You know this is wrong. You opened the door because you couldn't let go, and look what followed. If you let him through, there won't be anything left of her, or you." Elric's breathing grew faster, his chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven motions. The words battled inside his head, tearing him in two. His heart ached with longing, every memory of her rushing forward, overwhelming him. The way her laughter had filled their quiet little room, the warmth of her hand in his, the promise he had made to protect her always. Vale's voice softened further, almost gentle, as if sensing his hesitation. "I know what it feels like to lose everything. I know what it is to ache for someone who should never have been taken. I found a way to end that pain. I can give you what you want. I can give her back, whole and alive. Not a shadow, not a trick. But you must trust me." The blue light pulsed brighter, spilling farther into the room. The crack widened slightly with a faint groan of stone. The silhouette stepped closer, his sharp, angular face now partially visible through the shimmering glow. His eyes glinted faintly, strange and reflective, like glass catching moonlight. Matthew screamed as the tendrils pulled him another inch toward the wall, his heels scraping against the stone. "Elric, please, don't let him through." The furnace behind Elric roared even higher, its flames stretching upward as if trying to pull him back toward it, trying to drown out the voice that promised everything he wanted. Elric's burned hands trembled against the edge of the furnace, his knuckles white. The heat burned him deeper, and yet he stayed frozen, caught between two impossible choices. Vale's voice grew quieter, coaxing. "She died because you were too weak to save her then. Do you want to fail her twice?" The words hit him like a knife to the chest. He clenched his jaw, his teeth grinding. His breath came faster, the tears burning in his eyes. He couldn't stop the memory of her lying still, her hand cold in his. The helplessness he had felt then, the crushing guilt, it all came rushing back. The shadows sensed his hesitation, whispering eagerly, "Yes, yes, let him through, she'll smile for you again." Simeon took a sharp step closer, his voice cutting through the chaos, firm and commanding. "She's gone, Elric. Whatever that thing gives you, it won't be her. You know that." Elric's head jerked slightly towards Simeon, his eyes glistening with tears, but his body didn't move. The blue light pulsed again, brighter now, the crack groaning as it widened further. A faint breeze spilled through, cold and sharp, carrying with it a strange metallic scent. Vale stepped closer, his face fully visible now, calm and composed, with a faint smile that never reached his strange, reflective eyes. "You've already done the hardest part," he said softly. "You opened the door. You made the choice the others never could. Now let me finish it. She will wake. She will touch your hand again, and you will never be alone." Elric's chest heaved, his heart pounding painfully. His burned fingers slipped slightly against the furnace edge as he stared at the crack, at the calm, confident figure on the other side. Matthew screamed again as the tendrils yanked him sharply, pulling him dangerously close to the glowing fissure. Simeon shouted, tightening his grip, his muscles straining as he tried to keep him from being dragged into the wall. Elric, decide now. Do something. The furnace flames snapped violently, almost white-hot now, filling the chamber with an intense, searing light. The shadows hissed angrily, thrashing in protest, but still they pulled, tightening around Elric's legs and arms. The voices screamed over each other, fighting for dominance. He's lying. You'll lose everything. She's waiting for you, monk. End this before he comes through. Elric's hands slipped again against the furnace edge, sweat and burned skin making it harder to hold on. His eyes darted between the roaring flames and the widening crack, torn apart by the war raging inside him. Vale's voice, steady and calm, sliced through everything else. If you turn away now, she will be lost to you forever. This is your only chance. Elric's entire body shook. His heart screamed to believe him, to take the one chance to undo his loss, but something deep inside him whispered what Simeon had said, what he had known from the start. The thing that waited beyond the crack was no savior. And if he gave in, it wouldn't just take him. It would take everything. The crack split wider with a loud snap, glowing blue light flooding the chamber. A long, thin hand, pale and human-shaped but stretched unnaturally long, reached through, the fingers curling against the stone. Vale's smile widened slightly as he stepped closer. Choose, monk. You have only seconds. Elric's chest rose sharply as he took in a breath, his burned hands tightening on the furnace edge again. His eyes filled with tears, locked on the glowing crack and the figure stepping through. The shadows tightened around his legs, pulling hard, almost lifting him from the floor. Matthew screamed again as he was dragged another foot closer to the wall. Simeon shouted in frustration, barely holding him back. Elric's heart pounded harder, his body trembling as he stared at the flames. His mind screamed at him to move, to act before it was too late. The furnace roared higher, the white-hot flames reaching up as if trying to pull him in, as if urging him to make the only choice that could end this. Vale's hand pushed further through the crack, his long fingers stretching toward the floor. His calm voice came one last time, soft but sharp as a blade. Say yes, and this all ends. Elric squeezed his eyes shut, his tears falling freely now. His burned hands trembled, his knuckles white, his body leaning slightly forward toward the furnace, his breath catching in his chest. The chamber shook violently, dust raining from the ceiling, the walls groaning as the cracks split wider still. And then, Elric opened his eyes, his face set, his voice hoarse but certain. What he said, and what happened next, would decide everything. Elric's eyes locked on the roaring furnace, the white-hot flames reflecting in his tear-streaked face. His chest rose sharply as he drew in one last shaky breath. His burned hands tightened against the blistering metal edge, the skin tearing under the heat, but he didn't move away. His voice came hoarse, cracked but steady. No! The shadows hissed violently, a collective scream of anger rippling through the room. The tendrils around his legs tightened, pulling hard, trying to drag him away from the furnace. Vale's calm face shifted slightly, the faintest hint of irritation flickering in his sharp, reflective eyes. His long hand reached further through the crack, his fingers curling almost lazily against the stone. Think carefully, monk. There's no going back once you choose. Elric's body trembled, but he didn't look at Vale. His eyes stayed fixed on the flames as his voice broke again, louder this time, filled with a fierce resolve. She's gone, and I won't let you take anyone else. The shadows screamed again, a deafening wail that shook the stone walls. The tendrils yanked him with violent force, nearly pulling him backward, but he leaned forward instead, forcing his burned body closer to the furnace. Vale's calm expression hardened, his voice dropping lower, colder. Foolish. You could have had everything. The crack glowed brighter, the blue light pulsing wildly as the walls groaned under the pressure. Vale's other hand pressed against the fissure now, his long fingers curling into the stone as if ready to rip it apart. "If you will not open the door willingly, I will tear it open myself." The shadows surged violently at his words, their tendrils thrashing in fury, wrapping tighter around Elric's legs and arms. Matthew screamed as he was pulled another foot closer to the wall, his hands clawing at the stone floor. Simeon shouted in effort, barely holding on to him, his face red with strain. The furnace roared even louder, the flames snapping wildly, filling the room with searing heat. The white glow grew so bright it painted every surface in harsh light, burning against the cold blue from the crack. Elric gritted his teeth, his burned fingers slipping slightly as the tendrils pulled harder, but he forced himself forward another inch. The heat wrapped around him, almost unbearable now, blistering his skin. Vale's voice rose over the chaos, sharp and furious now. "You think you can stop me with fire? I am beyond fire, beyond death. You are nothing, monk." Elric's voice, hoarse and pained, shouted back, "Maybe I'm nothing, but you can't take what I won't give." And with that, he shoved himself forward, throwing his entire weight into the furnace. His burned body slammed into the white-hot flames, the heat engulfing him instantly. The shadows screamed in agony, their tendrils thrashing wildly before recoiling sharply, snapping back toward the walls. The chamber shook violently as the furnace roared higher, the flames erupting in a blinding burst of light. Vale hissed sharply, his reflective eyes narrowing as the crack trembled. The blue light flickered, weakening as if something inside it was being pulled away. His long hands dug into the stone, trying to hold the fissure open, but cracks spread through his silhouette like broken glass. "No!" Vale's voice thundered now, filled with sudden anger, his calm facade shattered. "You cannot close the door. You are mine." Elric's screams echoed once, raw and human, before being swallowed by the roaring furnace. The light around him pulsed brighter, the flames twisting violently, as if responding to his final act. The shadows shrieked louder, dissolving into dark smoke, their tendrils snapping into nothing. Matthew collapsed to the floor, gasping, as the last of the black coils vanished from his arm. Simeon grabbed him, pulling him away from the crack, just as the walls groaned under the strain. Vale's voice roared again, furious. "You will regret this. I will find another way." The crack flickered again, the blue light shuddering. Vale's face twisted in fury as his silhouette fractured further, his long hands cracking like glass under pressure. The fissure glowed once more, then suddenly slammed shut with a deafening snap, sending a wave of force through the room. The chamber went silent. The furnace roared one last time before dimming back to a normal orange glow. Dust drifted from the ceiling as the stone walls settled, the humming that had filled the room for so long finally fading into stillness. Matthew coughed, his chest heaving as he sat against the floor, wide-eyed and trembling. Simeon stood rigid for a moment, his staff still raised, his sharp gaze scanning the room as if expecting something else to lash out. The furnace crackled softly, its flames flickering gently now, quiet as if nothing had happened. Simeon finally lowered his staff, his jaw tightening as his eyes turned to the furnace. His voice was low, steady, but heavy with something that felt like regret. "Elric!" Matthew turned his head slowly toward the furnace, his face pale, his voice shaking. Is he gone?" Before Simeon could answer, a faint sound broke the silence. A soft breath. Matthew froze, his eyes widening. Simeon stepped closer to the furnace cautiously, his staff still in hand. The flames shifted slightly, flickering higher for a brief moment. A faint outline moved inside the glow, slight, human-shaped, sitting upright. Matthew gasped. "He's alive." The shape slowly shifted, standing shakily. As it stepped closer to the edge of the furnace, the flames flickered down slightly, revealing a burned, blackened figure. The skin was charred, but the outline was undeniably human. Simeon's grip tightened on his staff as he watched the figure step forward, one slow movement at a time. Elric stumbled out of the furnace, his burned body steaming slightly in the cool air. His face was barely recognizable, his eyes dull and unfocused, but he stood upright, breathing, somehow alive. Matthew's voice cracked. "Elric, how?" Elric didn't answer. His eyes, once filled with warmth and humanity, looked strangely distant, almost glassy. He turned slowly toward the furnace, then toward the wall where the crack had sealed. Simeon's sharp gaze stayed locked on him, his jaw tightening. "Something's wrong." Elric's head tilted slightly, almost unnaturally, as if testing the movement of his own neck. His burned lips curved into the faintest of smiles, but it didn't look like relief. It looked wrong. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost calm, but there was something in it, a tone that didn't belong to him. "You didn't think it would be that easy, did you?" Matthew froze, his face paling. "Elric?" Simeon's grip tightened on his staff as his eyes narrowed. "That's not him." Elric's burned face tilted further, his glassy eyes reflecting the faintest shimmer of blue light, the same cold glow that had spilled from the crack. His faint smile widened slowly, unnaturally. The chamber, once silent, seemed to hum again, faintly, just at the edge of hearing. And in the softest whisper, barely audible, a familiar voice echoed. Vale's voice, calm and satisfied. Doors work both ways. The hum in the chamber grew louder, faint but steady, as Elric stood there, his burned body steaming in the cool air. His glassy eyes reflected that same faint blue shimmer, and for a long moment, no one moved. Matthew's breathing was sharp and uneven, his body pressed back against the wall as if every instinct told him to stay as far away as possible. Simeon, though, didn't step back. He kept his grip firm on his staff, his sharp gaze locked on Elric's every movement. Elric tilted his head slightly, his burned face stiff, as though testing how much of him still worked. That faint smile remained, but it didn't feel like his anymore. Simeon took a careful step forward, his voice low, firm, and steady. "Vale, I know it's you. Whatever you are, you don't belong here." The burned lips curved a little wider, and the voice that answered carried a strange mix. Elric's tone layered with something else, deeper, smooth, and too calm. "You burned me, monk. You burned what was left of him, but you gave me what I needed. A body to walk in." Matthew's voice cracked as he shook his head, his words rushed and panicked. "That can't be him. It's Elric, isn't it? He fought it, he won." Simeon's jaw tightened, his gaze never leaving the figure. "No, Elric fought, and he gave everything he had. But Vale was clever. He wasn't trying to break the door open anymore. He just needed a way through. The fire didn't stop him. It gave him what he wanted. Elric." No. The thing wearing him took a slow step forward. The movements were stiff, awkward, as if his body didn't quite fit right anymore. That strange shimmer in his glassy eyes grew brighter for a second before dimming again. "I learned long ago that doors aren't only for entering. They're for leaving. And thanks to your noble little monk, I'm free again." Simeon raised his staff slightly, his expression unreadable. "You can't keep him. That body won't hold you for long. He's not yours." The figure tilted its head in amusement, the faintest laugh escaping cracked, burned lips. "Oh, it will hold long enough. Long enough for me to find what I need. You can't stop me, not now." The hum in the air grew louder, almost like a soft vibration running through the stone walls. Matthew covered his ears, his face twisted in fear. "What do we do? Simeon, what do we do?" Simeon didn't answer at first, his sharp gaze narrowing slightly as he studied the figure. "He's trapped here," he finally said, his tone measured. "For now. The fire sealed the main crack, and whatever connection he had to the other side is broken. He's walking in a borrowed body, but that body is dying. Look at him." The burned figure stood silent for a moment, but a faint tremor ran through it, an almost imperceptible shiver in the legs. Vale's voice came again, but it was sharper now, more strained. "You think this body's weakness will stop me? Even if it burns away, I can move again. I can find another." Simeon took another step closer, his tone sharper now. Not if there's nowhere else to go. The thing wearing Elric tilted its head slightly, as if considering his words. For the first time, there was a hint of unease in its posture. Simeon's voice stayed calm, but his staff gripped tighter. You got through because of Elric's ritual, because of the door he opened. But the door's gone now, sealed shut with the same fire you try to twist. You're stuck, Magister. All you have is that broken body, and it's already failing. A long silence filled the chamber. The hum in the air shifted, flickering in tone for a second, as though reacting to the words. Matthew's breathing slowed slightly, hope flickering in his wide eyes. Does that mean he can't leave? He can't spread this. The burned figure stood still for a moment before it finally moved again, slower this time. Vale's voice came back, softer, but edged with cold anger. Maybe I can't reach the other side again. Maybe not now, but you can't kill me. Not completely. There will always be another door, another fool who begs for what he's lost. Simeon's jaw tightened, but he nodded slightly, as if accepting that truth. Maybe, but not tonight. Not here. The figure swayed slightly, a visible tremor running through its limbs now. The strange blue shimmer in its eyes flickered, dimmed, then flared again. Elric's burned lips moved, and for a split second, the voice that came wasn't Vale's at all. It was Elric. Please, he whispered, his voice broken and strained, barely his own. His glassy eyes blinked once, wetness gathering in the corners despite the burns. Don't let him stay. Matthew gasped softly, his hand covering his mouth. Simeon's expression softened for the briefest moment, his sharp gaze holding steady as he stepped closer to the figure. His voice lowered, quiet but firm. I won't. You did enough, Elric. Rest now. The blue shimmer in Elric's eyes flared bright for a second, as if Vale was fighting harder now, but Simeon moved faster. With a sudden, deliberate motion, he swung his staff forward, striking the furnace edge sharply. Sparks burst upward as the flames surged high one last time, flaring white-hot, spilling outward in a wave of heat. The burned figure let out a sharp, guttural cry as the flames wrapped around it, pulling like living hands. The blue shimmer in Elric's eyes flashed wildly before fading, replaced by a dull, human gaze for just a second. His lips moved one last time, barely forming the word, thank you. The flames roared higher, wrapping the figure completely now. The body convulsed once, then collapsed forward into the furnace, the roar swallowing it whole. The chamber shook slightly as the fire flared brighter, then dimmed quickly, returning to its usual steady orange glow. The hum in the air faded completely, leaving only silence and the crackle of dying flames. Matthew sank to his knees, his shoulders shaking as he let out a long, trembling breath. Is it over? Simeon lowered his staff slowly, his sharp gaze softening just slightly as he looked toward the furnace. For now, he's gone. Or at least, he's trapped again. Matthew wiped at his face with the back of his sleeve, his breathing still shaky. Do you think he meant it? That there will be more doors? Simeon looked away from the furnace, his expression unreadable. There will always be those who want what they've lost badly enough to try. That's why we have to remember this, so no one else makes the same mistake. The two men stood in silence for a long moment, the quiet almost unsettling after everything that had happened. The faint warmth of the furnace filled the chamber, no longer wild or dangerous, just steady and calm. Finally, Simeon turned toward Matthew, his voice quieter, almost gentle. Come on, we need to leave this place, and we need to make sure no one ever finds those books again. Matthew nodded slowly, his face pale but determined. He glanced one last time at the furnace before following Simeon toward the heavy stone door. As they stepped out into the cool night air, the stars above seemed almost painfully bright after the darkness of the chamber. Matthew took a deep breath, the crisp wind filling his lungs, grounding him in the moment. But even as they walked away, Simeon glanced back once, his sharp eyes lingering on the door to the chamber. The silence was complete, the fire inside faintly flickering, but he knew better than to think this was truly the end. Because in the world of alchemy, knowledge had a way of surviving. And there would always be someone desperate enough to go looking for the dark truth behind it all. He tightened his grip on his staff as he turned back toward the path, his jaw set. "We can only hope," he murmured under his breath, "that when the next door opens, someone will be strong enough to close it again." The knights swallowed their footsteps as they disappeared into the distance, leaving the silent chamber behind, its secrets hidden for now.